पाकिस्तान और चीन के मीडिया के दरमियान ताल्लुकात के ख्वाह हैं। हमारे ताल्लुकात इंतहाई करीब और गहरे हैं। मीडिया और सकाफत ताल्लुकात इतने करीब नहीं हैं जितने सियासी ताल्लुकात करीब हैं। आज की मुलाकात का मकसद मीडिया राब्तों को फ़रोग़ देना है। मैं इस मौके पर चीन और कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी को इसके 100 साल की तकरीबात पर मुबारकबाद देता हूँ। पाकिस्तान में हम सदर शी जिनपिंग को जदीद दौर का एक बड़ा सियासतदान तस्वर करते हैं। पाकिस्तानी दो लिहाज से इनसे मुतासिर हैं। एक, करप्शन के खिलाफ इनकी जंग,
there must be rule of law in a society. In other words, the powerful must be brought under the law. And corruption is, when it destroys a country, it is when there is a corrupt elite which does not bring itself under the rule of law, and they are the ones who do the maximum damage. So I have watched the corruption drive, anti-corruption drive of
इनकी इंसदाद बदअनवानी की मुहिम बहुत कामयाब है और पाकिस्तानी इससे बहुत मुतासिर हैं।
So many high-level officials, ministerial-level people have been held accountable for their corruption. Secondly, and the most remarkable thing about
चीन का दूसरा कारनामा एक बहुत बड़ी तादाद में गरीबों को गुर्बत से निकालना है।
millions of people out of poverty. The figure we are told is almost
हमें बताया गया है कि चीन में 70 करोड़ अफराद को गुर्बत से निकाला गया है।
6-7 years. And recently,
हाल ही में चीन ने ऐलान किया है कि इसने इंतहाई गुर्बत का खात्मा कर दिया है।
eliminated extreme poverty. So this is, I think, one of the most remarkable.
ये किसी भी इंसानी माशरे में एक गैर मामूली कामयाबी है। मेरा ख्याल है कि किसी भी माशरे में ऐसी मिसाल नहीं मिलती है।
And the third thing is that we in Pakistan are committed.
तीसरी अहम बात यह है कि हम पाकिस्तान में चीन के साथ सियासी, इक्तिसादी
as well as in terms of economy and trade.
इक्तिसादी और तजारती ताल्लुकात को मजबूत बनाने के ख्वाह हैं।
In the BRI, and for Pakistan it is one of
सी पैक बेल्ट एंड रोड इकदाम में एक कलीदी मंसूबा है। पाकिस्तान के मुस्तकबिल की इक्तिसादी तरक्की के लिए ये मजबूत एक बहुत बड़ी उम्मीद है। हमने सी पैक मंसूबों का जायज़ा लेने के लिए एक आला सतह का कमीशन बनाया है। मैं अगले हफ्ते को गवादा जा रहा हूँ। मैं वहाँ सी पैक मंसूबों पर काम की रफ्तार का जायज़ा लूँगा।
and to make sure that we meet our timelines. And then I'm hoping, yes, meeting the Chinese labor,
मैं वहाँ चीनी कारकुनों से मुलाकात करूँगा और बात करूँगा।
and yes, talk to them, interact with them. But also, I look forward to my trip to
मैं अगले 1-2 माह में अपने चीन के दौरे का भी मुंतज़िर हूँ।
next month, 2 months, and to further strengthen both our
इस दौरे में पाकिस्तान और चीन के दरमियान सियासी और इक्तिसादी ताल्लुकात को फ़रोग़ देने पर बात करूँगा।
As Your Highness just said, that in 2020 the Communist Party already make a huge success in helping its people eliminate poverty. Also, it helps the country to navigate its people throughout the pandemic while achieve the positive GDP growth. So the CPC is continually using its people-centered policy.
सर, आप चीन की कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी की अवाम दोस्त पॉलिसी और चीन की तरक्की में किरदार को किस तरह देखते हैं?
And how do you think is CPC's role in the development of China?
You see, the CPC is a unique model
سی پی سی ایک منفرد ماڈل ہے. ہمیں اب تک یہ بتایا گیا ہے کہ مغربی جمہوریت کو کسی بھی معاشرے کی ترقی کا بہترین نظام ہے.
system of democracy, and we were told that that is the best way of progress of a society. But what the CPC has done is that it has
لیکن سی پی سی نے ایک ایسا متبادل نظام دیا ہے جس نے تمام مغربی جمہوریتوں کو
they have actually
مات دی ہے.
beaten all Western democracies in the way they have
جس طرح سی پی سی نے معاشرے میں میرٹ کو فروغ دیا ہے وہ قابل ذکر ہے.
see what is remarkable. A society succeeds if the
جس معاشرے میں حکمران طبقے کا احتساب ہوا ہو اور میرٹ ہو وہ کامیاب ہوتا ہے.
and accountability of the ruling elite, which means a transparent system, which is very important for progress, and secondly which brings up merit in a society. So until now the feeling was that democracy is the
اب تک یہ خیال تھا کہ جمہوریت کے ذریعے میرٹ پر حکمران منتخب ہوتے ہیں
where you get merit leadership based on merit and then hold that leadership accountable. But what
اور پھر اس قیادت کا احتساب بھی کیا جاتا ہے. لیکن سی پی سی نے انتخابی جمہوریت کے بغیر تمام مقاصد زیادہ بہتر طریقے سے حاصل کیے ہیں.
in China when I
جب میں نے چین میں کمیونسٹ پارٹی کے ہیڈ کوارٹر کا دورہ کیا تو میں نے دیکھا کہ
their system of sifting
ان کا ٹیلنٹ کو ڈھونڈنا اور پھر اس کی تربیت کرنے کا نظام کسی بھی انتخابی جمہوریت سے بہتر ہے.
electoral democracy does not bring up that sort of meritocracy or can hold people accountable. And third thing is that it's a very flexible system. You know,
تیسری بات یہ ہے کہ یہ بہت لچکدار نظام ہے.
that system allows them to bring a change.
جب وہ کوئی چیز تبدیل کرنا چاہتے ہیں یہ نظام اس کی حمایت کرتا ہے.
Even in Western democracy.
ہمارے معاشرے اور حتیٰ کہ مغربی جمہوریتوں میں کسی نظام میں تبدیلی بہت مشکل ہے.
And so many regulations and democracy straight jackets you. So you cannot always do what is the best for the society.
آپ ہمیشہ وہ نہیں کر سکتے جو معاشرے کے لیے بہتر ہے.
In our system. Whereas I find that in the greatness of the way China
چین نے اس لیے اتنی تیزی سے ترقی کی ہے کہ وہ اپنے نظام میں تیزی سے تبدیلی لاتے
they
ہیں.
feel that something is not working, they change it.
جب وہ سمجھتے ہیں کہ کوئی نظام کام نہیں کر رہا تو وہ فوراً اس کو چینج کر دیتے ہیں.
The long-term planning, they plan so.
چوتھی بات طویل مدت منصوبہ بندی ہے.
Sometimes in a democracy, you only, I mean in an electoral democracy, you only look
انتخابی جمہوریت میں صرف اگلے 5 سال کی منصوبہ بندی کی جاتی ہے.
long-term planning.
Hi, Prime Minister. Very grateful. Thank you for hosting this meeting online. I'm Yushan from China Daily. And I got a question. It's been 7 years since China and Pakistan established the.
سر پاکستان اور چین کے قریبی سیاسی اور معاشی حالات کو آپ کیسے دیکھتے ہیں؟
So among all the projects that the two sides have worked on, where do you see the future development direction and the cooperation direction of the China-Pakistan economic rail, and which areas could be the focus points in the next few years? And how do you think of the importance of such cooperation for both countries? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You see, for me, where I see this relationship moving ahead, and I mean the economic relationship, because there is the political relationship which is also very strong and moving ahead. But purely the economic relationship, I see the next phase of CPAC.
سی پیک کا اگلا مرحلہ پاکستان کے لیے بہت حوصلہ افزا ہے.
Very exciting. We have these special economic zones.
ہمارے پاس خصوصی اقتصادی زون ہوں گے. ہمیں امید ہے کہ چینی صنعت ان خصوصی زون کی طرف متوجہ ہوگی. ہم انہیں مراعات دیں گے. پاکستان میں لیبر سے سستی ہے اور امید ہے کہ چینی صنعت کار اس طرف متوجہ ہوں گے.
That industry which will benefit from a cheaper labor. And secondly, where we really want help from China, and we already
ہم چین سے زراعت کے شعبے میں تعاون کے
because
خواہاں
in
ہیں.
China the productivity, your agricultural productivity is much higher than Pakistan. Pakistan is basically an agricultural country.
پاکستان بنیادی طور پر ایک زرعی ملک ہے اور ہم نے اپنی زرعی پیداوار بڑھانے پر خاص توجہ نہیں دی.
So we really, this is the second phase because almost half our population lives off agriculture, and therefore we hope that we can really benefit.
ہمیں امید ہے کہ ہم چین کی جدید زرعی مہارت سے استفادہ کر سکتے ہیں.
So, Your Highness, my second question is related to the first one. I think you just made a great insight about the Communist Party's way of socialism democracy and also the Western style electoral democracy. So my second question is, how do you view the leadership style of
سر آپ
Xi
صدر
Jinping
شی
as the
جن
core
پنگ
of
کی
the
قیادت
CPC
کے
party?
انداز کو
What kind
کیسے
of
دیکھتے
image
ہیں؟
do you think he create on the international stage?
You see, President Xi Jinping, when I spoke to him, and Premier Li, what struck me was that the process which they have gone
صدر
through,
شی جن پنگ اور وزیر اعظم لی جس عمل کے ذریعے اس مقام تک پہنچے
they
ہیں
started work.
اس کے لیے انہوں نے 30 سال کی جدوجہد
They
کی.
started working right from the canton.
انہوں نے دیہات کی سطح سے جدوجہد شروع کی, وہاں سے انہوں نے
And from
مسلسل
there,
محنت کی.
They worked all the way up. They went through all the processes. So really, it's that long struggle which is what makes a leader.
اور اسی محنت سے لیڈر بنتے ہیں.
That sort of process.
اس قسم کا عمل بہت ساری انتخابی جمہوریتوں میں بھی ناپید ہے.
Countries that claim to have electoral democracy, you do not have that sort of process. So you look at the American president, he does not go through
امریکی صدر کو اس قسم کی سخت محنت اور جدوجہد سے نہیں گزرنا پڑتا.
training for leadership like President Xi Jinping and Premier Li, and the way they worked themselves up and the experience they got all the way from village and then to the province and higher levels. So when they get to the top,
چینی قیادت جب اعلیٰ ترین مقام پر پہنچتی ہے تو انہیں بھرپور تجربہ حاصل ہو چکا ہوتا ہے. وہ نظام کو مکمل طور پر سمجھتے ہیں, انہیں پتہ ہوتا ہے کہ نچلی سطح پر لوگ کیسی زندگی گزار رہے ہیں. یہی وجہ ہے کہ وہ غربت کے خاتمے میں کامیاب رہے ہیں.
bringing so many millions of people out of poverty. So this is something quite unique for China.
یہ بہت منفرد ہے جو بہت ساری جمہوریتوں میں بھی نہیں ہوتا.
I think leave alone the rivalry now between
چین اور امریکہ کے اقتصادی اختلافات کو ایک طرف رکھیے.
this economic rivalry, but I can tell you that the world, no matter whatever they think of
دنیا
China,
چین کے بارے میں جو بھی سوچتی ہے ہر ایک اسی بات کو سراہے گا.
China's economic dominance now. But apart from that, everyone has to admire what President Xi Jinping has done.
جو کامیابی صدر شی جن پنگ نے حاصل کی ہے,
Leaders' achievements
لیڈر کی کامیابی خود بولتی ہے اور شی جن پنگ نے دنیا کو ثابت کیا ہے.
has proved to the world.
Your Excellency, how do you comment on the aid programs provided?
سر آپ چین کی طرف سے پاکستان کے لیے کورونا ویکسین سمیت 8 پروگراموں کے بارے میں کیا کہیں گے؟
Social livelihood sectors.
I think, first of all, the way China dealt with,
جس طرح چین نے کورونا کا مقابلہ کیا وہ منفرد تھا.
I mean, considering that this pandemic started in China, the way China coped with it, and then when you look at the rest of the world, China really stands out in the way they dealt with this pandemic. And we are very thankful to China because
چین نے جس طرح ہماری مدد کی, ویکسین عطیہ کی, اس پر ہم چین کے شکر گزار ہیں.
the vaccine to us. And really, Pakistan is one of
چین کے
after
بعد
China,
پاکستان وہ ملک ہے
Pakistan
جس نے
is
بہتر انداز میں
has
کورونا کا
actually
مقابلہ کیا.
done very well in the way that we dealt with the pandemic, the way which we coped with it. So Pakistan stands out, in this whole region. And one of the reasons is that China provided us the
چین کی مدد سے ہم اپنے طبی عملے کو بروقت ویکسین لگانے میں کامیاب رہے.
the health workers. The first thing we did was vaccinate the health workers and then went for the vulnerable groups. So, the people who were most at risk and we were all worried about were the health workers because, they had to deal with the patients. And so we were always worried that, if they became demoralized, then, our health system would fail. So when we were able to, thanks to China, we were able to vaccinate them. That gave us a lot of confidence.
My name is Liu Xin. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you, even via Zoom, on this very prosperous occasion when China is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of the CPC. But this year is also a very special year for China and Pakistan, as both countries are celebrating.
سر پاکستان اور چین سفارتی تعلقات کے 70 سال بنا رہے ہیں.
So I'd like to ask you, based on what you just talked about the releases of the Chinese system and the kind of strong relationships that Pakistan has fostered with China, what do you think the 70 years of
آپ اس 70 سال کی دوستی کو خطے کے لیے کس طرح دیکھتے ہیں؟
means for the region and for the world, and where do you see relations going further? How to deepen these already very strong ties? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, firstly, let me just talk about Pakistan and China first, and then the region. For Pakistan, there was
پاکستان اور چین کے تعلقات بہت خصوصی ہیں.
Although our relationship started 70 years ago, but you know, China, whenever Pakistan was in trouble, whenever I'm in trouble politically, internationally, when we had conflicts with our neighbor, China always stood with us.
چین نے ہمیشہ مشکل وقت میں ہمارا ساتھ دیا.
China have a special place in the
چین اور
hearts
اس کے لوگوں کا پاکستانیوں کے دلوں میں خاص مقام ہے.
because everyone here remembers, you know, you only remember a friend who stands with you in your difficult times. In good times, everyone stands with you. But in your difficult, tough times, bad times, you remember those people who stood by you. That's why you will find that in Pakistan, people always have a special fondness for people of China. So this relationship has only got stronger.
دونوں ملکوں کے تعلقات روز بروز مضبوط ہو رہے ہیں.
You know, on the international forums, Pakistan and China always stand together. And now, when you talk about the region, there's this strange great power rivalry taking place. You know, you see the United States and the United States being wary of China, and you know, I don't need to say all this is now public knowledge. You know, the way China and the United States are sort of
چین اور امریکہ کے اختلافات سے پیچیدگیاں پیدا ہوتی ہیں, اس سے مسائل پیدا ہوتے ہیں.
It's formed this regional alliance called the Quad, which is US, India, and then a couple of other countries. So from that point of view, Pakistan thinks that
پاکستان سمجھتا ہے یہ بات درست نہیں ہے کہ امریکہ اور دیگر مغربی طاقتیں پاکستان جیسے ملکوں کو کسی ایک گروپ کا ساتھ دینے پر مجبور کیا جائے. ہم کیوں کسی کی سائیڈ لیں؟ ہم سب کے ساتھ اچھے تعلقات چاہتے ہیں.
It's not going to happen that if there's pressure put on Pakistan to change its relationship or
پاکستان چین کے ساتھ اپنے تعلقات کو کبھی کم نہیں کرے گا. یہ کبھی نہیں ہوگا کہ پاکستان اور چین کے تعلقات بہت گہرے ہیں.
So to sum up, whatever will happen, our relationship
جتنا بھی دباؤ ہو ہمارے تعلقات تبدیل نہیں ہوں گے.
is not going to change.
How do you deepen these already very strong ties, Your Excellency?
Number one is trade. You know, the CPEC is a really, it's right in front of you, it's something. It's the biggest thing happening in Pakistan. For us, this is where we think
CPEC سے ہمارا اقتصادی مستقبل وابستہ ہے.
So this is a big economic feature in Pakistan. And then there's the political relationship. And political relationship has got stronger.
ہمارے سیاسی تعلقات دن بدن مضبوط ہو رہے ہیں.
Because whatever happens in every international forum, Pakistan and China stand together.
Mr. Prime Minister, my second question is about Olympic Games. Beijing will host the 2022 Olympics.
سر بیجنگ اولمپکس اور پیرا اولمپکس گیمز کی میزبانی کرے گا. آپ کی کیا توقعات ہیں؟
On China's efforts to host the games, and what are your expectations for the games?
Well, I watched on television, of course, the Olympics in China. And you always find that a country that is on the ascendancy, its sports also follows in the same direction. It also, in sporting, I mean, China, if you look back, China's performance 30 years ago, and now you compare now in Olympics, China is now the emerging power.
چین ایک ابھرتی ہوئی سپورٹنگ پاور ہے.
Go together because all the skills, the institutionalization that goes into a nation building and a nation moving forward are exactly the same in which a nation's sports move forward. Because you compete internationally in sports, the better you become, the better your institutions become, which can
جب ادارے مضبوط ہوتے ہیں تو اس ملک کے کھیل کو بھی فروغ ملتا ہے.
A small country like New Zealand just now, I know you don't play cricket in China, but a country which of 5 million people has just won the cricket world championship from India, which has 1.3 billion people. And 5 million people, a country of 5 million people has actually won a championship against them because they have a very good system of sifting, bringing up talent and polishing it. So countries clearly which institutionalize better, they move upwards because the system of polishing the talent in the country is better than the others.
سر اس دفعہ جاپان میں اولمپکس نہیں ہو رہی, اس کے بارے میں آپ کی کیا رائے ہے؟
Well, we are just watching in Japan also they're having problems of hosting Olympics. And there's a lot of problem because of COVID. The answer is I don't know really because we do not know the trajectory of the COVID situation. You think that you've now got under control and then you have some Delta variant coming in and then again people get worried. So it's world is coming to terms with this disease.
دنیا کو ابھی کورونا کا سامنا ہے اور ہم اس حوالے سے کوئی حتمی رائے قائم نہیں کر سکتے.
Right now to make very firm calculations and decisions about the future right now. So the answer is I don't know.
Good wishes are due to China.
Yes, we wish them all the best.
یور ایکسلنسی میں یہ پوچھنا چاہوں گا کہ چین کی جانب سے سنکیانگ میں جو مختلف اقدامات اٹھائے جا رہے ہیں اسے امریکہ اور چند دیگر مغربی ممالک کی جانب سے نسل کشی قرار دیا جا رہا ہے. اور ابھی G7 کا جو سمٹ ہوا تھا اس کا اعلامیہ جاری کیا گیا 13 جون کو, اس میں ہانگ کانگ, سنکیانگ اور چند دیگر جو چین کے اقدامات ہیں اس پر بے بنیاد تنقید کی گئی ہے. تو آپ کی اس بارے میں کیا رائے ہے؟
You see, first of all, our interaction with the Chinese officials, that version of what is happening in Xinjiang is completely
سنکیانگ کے حوالے سے مغربی میڈیا اور حکومتوں کے موقف اور چین کے موقف میں فرق ہے.
and the Western governments. So because we have a very strong relationship with China, and because we have a relationship based on trust, so we actually accept the Chinese version.
ہم چینی موقف کو تسلیم کرتے ہیں.
What they say about their programs in Xinjiang, so we accept it. The second point is that we find it a little bit hypocritical when there are much worse human rights issues.
کشمیر سمیت دنیا میں ناانصافی کے متعدد واقعات ہوئے ہیں مگر ان پر کوئی توجہ نہیں دیتا.
There's a huge human rights problem. There are about 9 million, 8 million Kashmiris which are basically has been put into an open prison until recently. It's a police state where there are extrajudicial killings, there's imprisonment, there's arbitrary arrests and a ban on media, and yet there is hardly any comment.
کشمیر کے حوالے سے مغربی میڈیا میں بہت کم کوریج ہوتی ہے جو منافقانہ رویہ ہے.
For freedom struggle, it's a disputed territory. Yet you do hardly get any coverage in the Western media, and we hear about Xinjiang and Hong Kong, which is a bit hypocritical.
دوسرا سوال میں پوچھنا چاہوں گا ویکسینیشن کے حوالے سے. خوشائند بات یہ ہے کہ پاکستان میں حکومت کی جانب سے ویکسینیشن کا آغاز کیا گیا اور لوگ جوق در جوق اس میں حصہ لے رہے ہیں, اور خاص طور پر چینی ویکسینز سائنو فارم, سائنوویک اور کنسائنو لگائی جا رہی ہے. اس دوران وبائی صورتحال کے دوران جو چین اور پاکستان کا تعاون رہا اور اب بھی جاری ہے, اس حوالے سے آپ کی رائے جاننا چاہیں گے.
چین نے ہم سے کرونا وبا کے ابتدا میں تعاون کیا.
And the vulnerable sections, the senior sections of the society. And even now we have a very close collaboration going on with China. We are expecting another consignment coming soon. And so today we are expecting a consignment. And it is one reason that we have really been able to cope with this pandemic compared to all our neighbors.
Yeah, this is the CMT family conference. So the previous reporters has already asked questions that I want to ask. So I want to ask a follow-up question regarding Xinjiang. We noticed that recently some Western media criticized you only because you didn't criticize China's policy in Xinjiang. So some media even said that this should have China by silence over Uyghurs. So what's your response to these voices?
So I just answered this question. Which I think it's, we have, with our interactions with the Chinese government, the Chinese version is completely different to the version which we hear from the Western media and the Western government. So because of our close proximity and relationship to China, we actually accept the Chinese version.
سنکیانک کے حوالے سے ہم چین کے موقف کو تسلیم کرتے ہیں.
We find it very hypocritical that while the Uyghurs situation is highlighted so much, and Hong Kong, on the other hand, Kashmir, which is a disputed territory between Pakistan and India, and the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which gave the Kashmiris the right to choose their own destiny through a plebiscite, yet there's hardly any mention of Kashmir, where 100,000 of Kashmiris have died. So this is what we find in Pakistan very hypocritical.
Now we notice that some people claim that a closer Pakistan-China relations will intensify conflict in the region because of India. So what's your comment?
Pakistan and China were always close. But I think this idea that India is supposed to counterbalance China for the Western world, I think this is going to be very detrimental for China. For India. Not for China. China is too strong. India's the benefits India will get from trade with China.
بھارت چین کے ساتھ تجارت سے زیادہ فائدے میں رہے گا.
To act as a sort of counterbalance. The country that will lose out is going to be India. The relationship, as I said, between China and Pakistan actually has nothing to do with India. We have 70 years of diplomatic relationship, and through all crises in Pakistan's history, China has stood with us. So it really has nothing to do with India. Our relationship is a bilateral relationship, is extremely strong.
His Excellency, my question is now Pakistan and China have set an example.
سر پاکستان اور چین کے تعلقات مثالی ہیں. انسانیت کے لیے یہ تعلقات کتنے سودمند ہیں.
Challenges. And how do you think the importance of building a closer China-Pakistan community of shared destiny and shared future for mankind?
I think what I experienced when I went to, on the invitation of President Xi Jinping, what I noticed was the amount of work China is now doing in terms of improving the environment, fighting global warming. The awareness in China, in fact,
چین میں ماحولیاتی آلودگی سے متعلق آگاہی بہت زیادہ ہے. صدر شی اس حوالے سے کام کر رہے ہیں.
A special city which is just built. It's an environmentally green city, specifically built, which we were invited to. I don't remember the name of the city, but we went there and everything there is environmentally friendly. So China is making great strides towards that. And I think the future of mankind, the biggest threat mankind
آنے والے دنوں میں انسانیت کے لیے سب سے بڑا خطرہ ماحولیاتی آلودگی ہے.
And China really, when President Xi Jinping hosted this conference, he invited leaders from all over the world, and it was just, the theme was how to save mankind from this catastrophe which is called climate change and global warming.
Yes. Thank you so much, Excellency, for giving us this opportunity, and it's really great honor for us. My question is that the first phase of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) yield fruitful results in different areas, including energy and infrastructure.
سر سی پیک کے ثمرات کے حوالے سے کیا کہیں گے؟
And second, how will China and Pakistan cooperate to ensure the success of second phase of CPEC? Especially, how do you see Sino-Pak economic growth? Thank you, Excellency.
Firstly, the first phase of CPEC was
سی پیک کا پہلا مرحلہ توانائی اور رابطے تھا.
And then energy projects. So that was the first phase, because Pakistan had problems we had shortage of energy. And then of course the connectivity, which is what the CPEC initially was. Now the second phase is now deeper cooperation. And that is, from Pakistan point of view, the special economic zones. And the idea is to attract investment into these special economic zones, which will help employment in Pakistan, improve our growth rate, create wealth for our country. But equally important for us is help from China in our agriculture. Now, half of our population lives off agriculture, and the productivity of our agriculture, unfortunately, is extremely low. So we have compared the productivity in China, which compared to us is much higher, and then all the various technologies which are used in agriculture. So the second phase is for us.
ہم اب زرعی شعبے میں چین سے استفادہ کرنا چاہتے ہیں.
Also skills education. We are collaborating in
ہنرمندی کے حوالے سے تعاون کے خواہاں ہیں.
in Pakistan.
How you will speed up this China-Pakistan economic cooperation?
We have already, now we formed a committee, which is, the whole point of that committee, the CPEC committee, is to monitor the CPEC projects and make sure that there are no impediments in their way.
Your Excellency, my last question is about the future, the near future of international relations. As we're seeing with the new U.S. administration, there seems to be the talk of alliance of like-minded countries to counter some kind of other system or country. What is your understanding? How do you look
سر امریکہ کی نئی انتظامیہ کے چین کے حوالے سے پالیسی پر کیا کہیں گے؟
I find this deeply worrying for the world. I find this rivalry for no rhyme or reason. I find this worrying because then, just like in the Cold War, the world was divided between the Soviet camp and then the American camp. And so it created a lot of problems for countries who, they had to choose sides, either one side or the other. And then, for a short while, there was this, the whole worry was this war on terror. And the whole world was somehow involved in fighting terrorism. And now we see this emerging rivalry between China and the Western.
چین اور امریکہ کی مخالفت بہت تشویشناک ہے. دنیا ایک مرتبہ پھر دو حصوں میں تقسیم ہو جائے گی. ہم کیوں کسی کی سائیڈ لیں؟ چین کے ساتھ ہمارے 70 سال سے پرانے تعلقات ہیں.
And if someone asks us to choose sides, we find that China is our friend for 70 years through highs and lows. They've stood with us. So people in Pakistan have this great faith and trust in our friendship with people in China. So why should we be asked to take sides now? Why can't we have a relationship with everyone? And this is the feeling right now, because I think this this what past tells us, this world divided into camps, we find that this is detrimental to the world.
How do you see things unfolding?
سر افغانستان کی صورتحال کے بارے میں کیا کہیں گے؟
Difficult question you asked me.
یہ بہت مشکل سوال ہے، اس وقت کسی کے پاس اس کا جواب نہیں
No one
ہے۔
has the answer. You see what the let me just say, the biggest mistake made by the Americans was that
امریکہ کی سب سے بڑی غلطی یہ ہے کہ انہوں نے عسکری قوت سے مسئلہ حل کرنے کی کوشش کی۔
they kept doing the same thing over and over and over again and thought they would get a different result. Because Afghanistan has a history and
افغانستان کی تاریخ ہے کہ کوئی افغانوں کو تابع نہیں کر سکا۔
they do not accept outside power intervention. They do not like to be controlled from powers from outside. That's the history. And so even when countries have conquered Afghanistan, like the British did in the 19th century, and then the Russians invaded, Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 20th century, you can invade in Afghanistan, but when you stay there, it is very difficult to control the country because they are very independent-minded people. So this war in Afghanistan went on too long. It has created deep divisions in the Afghan society. When a war goes on for that long, when on both sides people have died, families have suffered, to bring them back together is not very easy. It takes time. And now what you're seeing in Afghanistan is that the moment the Americans decided there was no military solution, they gave a date of exit. And the moment they gave
جیسے ہی امریکہ نے افغانستان سے نکلنے کا اعلان کیا، طالبان نے اسے اپنی فتح قرار دیا۔
The Americans considered that as a victory. Now when they think they won the war, it's very difficult to make them
ایسی صورتحال میں انہیں سیاسی حل پر لانا بہت مشکل ہے۔
come to some sort of a political settlement becomes very difficult. One, because the war went on too long, there are deep divisions. Secondly, once they feel they won the war, it's very difficult to make them now get back together. And so the worrying thing for Pakistan is that if Afghanistan has a civil war,
اگر افغانستان میں خانہ جنگی ہوتی ہے، اس سے سب سے زیادہ متاثر پاکستان ہوگا۔
then the consequences will be, after Afghanistan, the country that will suffer the most is going to be Pakistan. Because, we have a long border with Afghanistan. Taliban is basically a Pashtun movement. And there are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than Afghanistan. Half the Afghanistan population is Pashtun. So the worry here is that we will be deeply affected by if there is a civil war. So therefore we want there to
اس لیے ہم ہر صورت افغانستان کا سیاسی حل چاہتے ہیں۔
So before concluding this session, I would like to inform the media that Prime Minister has written a special congratulatory letter to President Xi on CPC's 100 years anniversary. Also, Prime Minister has written an op-ed that will appear in Chinese media. I believe this will opinion piece. And also
آپ سب کا بہت بہت شکریہ جو آپ نے میٹنگ اٹینڈ کی۔
CPAC is going, we will interact with Chinese media more regularly, and we will keep inviting friends from Beijing, Shanghai, and also from here. And thank you very much for being part of this.
فرینڈز، اگر ہماری ویڈیو آپ کو اچھی لگے تو ہمارے چینل کو سبسکرائب کر کے بیل کا آئیکن ضرور پریس کر دیں۔